Now we're live.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, how are you today, Rachel?
Good. Like I was saying, I'm a little tired today.
Yeah.
Struggle with my sleep. So I
Mm,
don't know what that's about. So I got to get that figured out. But I'm definitely a little tired today.
yeah. What's your normal sleep routine like? Like what time do you go to bed? What time do you wake up?
It varies. Like I was saying in the first live cast, I'm trying to go to bed a little bit earlier, around like 10 o'clock, 10:30. But I've been finding lately 11:30, 12 is when I've been falling asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a little late for me. If I go to bed that late, I'm completely messed up the next day. It feels like yeah, went out to a college party or something. Like I get so messed up with
Yes.
sleep. Yeah, it's funny because I'll go to bed at around 10 o'clock on a Friday nowadays. It's like I'm getting older, getting older, you know?
Good. Your body needs it. You push it, so you got to give it like
Yeah.
relaxation time.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it's
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
how are you doing though?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been really busy doing a lot of things. Probably the biggest thing that I'm dealing with right now is my shoulder. I got an EKG last Friday. You know, for those who don't know, I haven't been able to externally rotate this shoulder. It's not working. But I got an EKG that revealed that my muscle, my infraspinatus, that's responsible for externally rotating, is completely deinnervated. So it means like even if I fix my labrum and assist, it still may not change what's going on with a neurological issue. So it's been a big test for me
Yes.
to like accept that because I'm a physical therapist. I know what that means. That means it may never come back. It may happen. It may not. So it's really brought up a lot of stuff in terms of accepting that I'll be aging. I'll be turning 40 this year, and I'm like, oh wow, like things are starting to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and it's making me look at my relationship to my body, you know,
Right.
and what it can do. And the more I'm tied to like this has to be this way, or when something gets weaker or looks different or whatever, the more I'll suffer. So it's interesting because I have this mantra that helps me like in every practice of letting go and surrendering. It's okay if it happens, and it's okay if it doesn't happen, right? So it's really helped me kind of just be with the situation. It's okay if my arm changes. It's okay if it doesn't change. And I think that's a good way to look at how people approach the 30-day challenge. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people come in and they're like, I've got to lose weight. If it doesn't happen, this is the end of me. Oh no, I've got to get 15 pounds down. I've got to be able to fit in those. Like so much holding on and resistance, you know, as opposed to, well, I'm going to do the best I can. And if I lose weight, my blood profile improves and I fit in those skinny jeans, and that's great. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay too. I'll have an experience, I'll learn from it, and I'll keep moving forward. But it's interesting because those two perspectives have radical differences in terms of the words that we say, the feelings that we feel, and ultimately the actions that we take. You know, so I posted something earlier this week about the difference between have to do something and I get to, or I choose to, or I want to. You know, it puts us in a victim identity as opposed to kind of creating a new life for us and aligning it with the situation. It's such a powerful lesson. So, yeah, I mean, I think as in life, we're just going to keep having more of these opportunities to look at them and experience them. And you know, I'm grateful for whatever happens to my shoulder. If it doesn't come back, that's fine too. And I'll just get better at other things. You know.
That's a great way to have, like a great positive attitude to have towards it.
Yeah, yeah. It's something that I learned a lot from my patients when I was doing physical therapy. You know, I saw some people age really gracefully and handle like severe instances like to the T, like beautifully. Like I treated two people with Lou Gehrig's disease one time for a 2-year period, right? And Lou Gehrig's disease, for people who don't know, it's fatal. There's no cure for it. It's probably the most uncomfortable way to go, where you slowly get these neurological losses over time. So you start losing sensation, the ability to move your toes, and it works up your legs and your extremities. And it's anywhere from like a 2 to 4 year period. And eventually the muscles in your breath, your airway stop working, and
Yeah.
you die. But so I treated two people, two men, and one of them, both with ALS over the same 2-year period, and they had completely different outcomes in the way they approach the situation. One of them was very resistant to the situation. Like, this shouldn't be happening to me. Why? You know, every day he watched the news and argued about this and his family. And like, they were always arguing in that household. And it was very tough to be in there, very tough energy. And the other guy was like, this is my lot in life. This is what I'm going to do. This is how, and he still had friends come over for like football games, and he drank beer, and like, he laughed and smiled all the way to the end of his life. And it really made me look at perspective in a big way in terms of how we handle like adversity, you know, in situations, because one of them suffered greatly and one of them just accepted the situation and didn't have a problem. So like little situations like that, man, really, really opened my eyes to a lot of things. So.
For sure, because I mean, when you stress about stuff, stress can hold you back in so many different ways as well.
Yeah.
So it's your power of your mindset can make the most of it. Like we only have one life, so you might as well make the most of what you're given, enjoy it, live it to the fullest, and then what happens, like you said, it's a hurdle. Just get over it and find a new way. Like you said, you'll dominate a new exercise, or you'll learn something new for yourself. So it's a great idea. Positive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you want to start out with questions today? Do we have some good questions?
We do. We have quite a few today. The first one is from Patty. She said, I would like to know if the sunflower oil is not allowed on the 30-day challenge. I do not use butter and found a vegan butter made with cashews, water, and sunflower oil.
Yeah, so sunflower oil is one of the oils that we want you to not use because it's an industrial seed oil, right? So it's very unstable. It's very high in omega-6 fat. It's inflammatory. It's going to cause a lot of free radicals. It's going to accelerate aging. It's poor for gut health. Like, just stop with sunflower oil. Stop with canola oil. Stop with vegetable oil. I know it's confusing because a lot of those things have been said to be healthy, heart healthy, and some of them may even still say that on the bottle, but they're absolutely not. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. But if you don't like, did she say butter doesn't work for her?
Yeah, she said, I don't like butter and I'm vegan.
Yeah, if she doesn't like butter, she could try, coconut oil or avocado. Avocado oil would be a much better way to go. And the reason why, avocado oil is a monounsaturated fat, but it's also extremely high smoke point. It actually has a higher smoke point than, say, coconut oil or even butter or ghee, for that matter. And it's really tasty. So I would definitely look into avocado oil. You're always looking for extra virgin, organic, best quality you can get. But definitely that would be a better substitute than sunflower oils. But it is unfortunate because you'll find sunflower oil in a lot of packaged foods, right? And you go to restaurants, even like Whole Foods, they'll use canola oil all the time. So especially during the 30 days, really limit the time that you eat those packaged foods. And also know that, there probably are options out there that do have coconut oil or avocado oil or some olive oil that's going to be better for you. Just look for those. They would be a better option than sunflower oil,
Yeah, that is true. Like, half the things you look at the store and the ingredients, they all say sunflower oil. Even like after the 30-day challenge, we're saying, can I use this dried fruit? And if you look, a lot of them actually have sunflower oil in it, which is insane that you'd even add that in a dried fruit when you're just literally supposed to be drying it out.
Yeah. It's a profit margin game because those seed oils are produced in mass quantities by the food industry. So their margins are a lot better. So they put that in the food and they can offer it they can produce it for a cheaper price and they can make more money. So that's just the situation that we're dealing with. And, every now and then it's okay, but like, especially for the things that you eat at home, like, really make sure your pantry doesn't have that stuff. Never cook with that stuff at home and try to limit the times that you eat out. The goal during these 30 days is to really maximize nutrition, minimize toxicity. Like, think of that more than anything else. And, that's where the focus should be.
Perfect. Well, we'll talk about fats. We'll go ahead and we have another question from Maria, which is, please explain ghee, what it is and how is it produced?
Oh yeah. So ghee, I love ghee. Have you ever had ghee?
I have. I've had it a few times. I'm not so familiar with it because I more go to coconut oil, but I've had ghee. It's a little bit different to get used to in the beginning, though.
Yeah, it has a nuttier taste.
Yeah.
Whereas so ghee, for those who don't know, is essentially clarified butter. You take butter, you heat it up, and the heating process removes the milk solids and the water from the butter. So what you're left with is essentially the butter without the casing and without the lactose. So people who are sensitive to dairy in any way or have a hard time with butter, they'll likely do much better with ghee. It's a safer fat to cook with. It's a safer fat to consume. And it's easier on digestion in a big way. So a lot of people have a hard time with butter because of the casing, and the casing, the milk proteins in butter make it difficult to digest and break down, and they can be inflammatory. So in this sense, ghee is a lot safer for you. And it does, like I mentioned, does have a higher smoke point than butter does. It has some differences in terms of the vitamins. So ghee is going to be higher in what's going to have a lot of A and E, whereas butter is going to have vitamins A and D. And both of them you need. It's good to have a wide spectrum, but a little bit different there. And the taste, like I mentioned, it's just creamy compared to being nutty. But I love ghee. I think it's great. And I cook with it often, and I will also put it in my coffee, sometimes in preference of butter, because I kind of like that little bit nuttier taste. Yeah.
I'll have to try that now that you recommended it. I'll give it a
Yeah, it's just really good. But yeah, you're looking for good quality stuff. There's some good stuff you can get on Amazon. You can go to Thrive. They have a lot of good brands that you can get, Thrive Market. And most of the grocery stores now carry a pretty good line of ghee. Yeah, I think it's great.
Wonderful. We just had a question pop up actually that sent us from Fred. He said, what is the optimal ratio for omega-6 to omega-3 fats? Which healthy foods have omega-6 fats?
Yeah, so optimal, and this is what we looked at when we look at the fatty profile of our ancestors. It's more like 1:1, 1:4, somewhere in that range. And we talked about this a lot, that currently we're consuming way too many omega-6 fats, way too many industrial seed oils, and we're getting more like the 1:20, 1:30 range. And that sets us up for, mainly systemic inflammation and producing a lot of free radicals and poor gut health and things like that. So as far as the healthy foods that have omega-6 fat, you're thinking of nuts and monounsaturated cooking oils. Those are like olive oil is going to have omega-6 fat predominantly. Even avocado is going to be more omega-6 fat predominantly. But at the same time, with nuts, we have to be really careful about that. Like to not go too crazy on nuts because they can be gut irritating. They are super dense in calories. And they also, for people who are looking to lose weight, they also have carbohydrates in there. So they're not just fat. So that's the skinny on omega-6 fats that you should think about. But essentially, yeah, monounsaturated fats and nuts are going to be with omega-6 fat.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
all right. That was the question that popped up. We'll go back to the emailed questions.
All right.
Let's see. So from Evan, everyone was saying that there's a lot of discussions. Evan, who helps us answer a lot of questions, one of the coaches, was saying there's a lot of questions regarding the coconut oil. Since the Harvard, remember the Harvard report that came out saying that coconut oil is now poison. So he wanted us to cover that today.
Yeah, I saw that. Pure poison. Poison.
Pure poison is what she said it was.
I mean, if it was pure poison, I'd be dead by now because I've been eating it for like 10 years and we would not be having good results in this group because we recommend coconut oil quite a bit. And I think that's just one thing we got to look at in general is a lot of people that are saying these things, they're not actually people that are working with people trying to get healthy, so that they're not really seeing it in practical ways and how it's playing out in people's health. They're not having dialogue with patients and clients, and they could learn a lot if they did. They're looking at things from a very far distance, and as I'll discuss, they're looking at it from a super old paradigm in terms of what's really happening. So this happens like probably once a year, maybe twice a year, that a study or somebody comes out and they say something outlandish like coconut oil is pure poison, or the paleo diet will kill you, and red meat is going to cause cancer, and it's all bad, and you should go back to like eating grains and munching on Coke and having jelly. I don't know, like it's just kind of funny, right? So essentially, what she's saying here is that coconut oil is a saturated fat, and saturated fat is causal to heart disease, right? And this is an old belief that came from a bunch of studies mainly one big study by a guy named Ansel Keys back in I think it was the late 50s, early 60s, called the 7-country study. And what he did was actually study 22 countries and try to find the correlation between saturated fat and heart disease. And what he did is he took 7 of those 22 countries and made his own study and found, and using those 7 countries, found a connection between saturated fat and heart disease. And what he left out, for instance, were those other countries, and one of them was like France, right? So France has an extremely high consumption of saturated fat with virtually little to no like heart disease at that time, right? So he brought this information back, and the American Heart Association got all over it, and they started changing the food recommendations. They took saturated fat out of the food pyramid. They put in things like grains. They made industrial seed oils a staple, canola oil, vegetable oils, peanut oil, safflower oil, and all of a sudden everything changed, right? And these are saturated fats. These are foods that our ancestors and people in the early part of the 19th or the 20th century were eating quite frequently. I mentioned Weston Price before, who went all around the world studying indigenous tribes, and he found that they ate high amounts of saturated fat in the forms of things like butter and animal fats, but little to no traces of heart disease, right? So to go out on a limb and make that claim that saturated fat is causal to heart disease is very, very dangerous, right? There's many factors that cause heart disease, but the myths there are that eating cholesterol and saturated fat raises cholesterol levels. Eating dietary cholesterol, like things like egg yolks, right? And the other myth is that high cholesterol in the blood is what's causing the heart disease. And the other belief later on down the road is that statins should be given to even healthy individuals so they don't get heart disease, right? So this is a big problem, because ever since we've changed the recommendations of the food pyramid, we started eating foods that actually are more problematic to causing heart disease, like these industrial seed oils, like grains that are doing things like causing inflammation, and causing us to be insulin resistant. We know now that like the insulin resistance and inflammation are much more causal to heart disease than, say, the consumption of cholesterol. So it's a big deal. But there's actually been 17 different systematic reviews and meta-analysis conducted in recent years that have shown there's no clear link between saturated fat consumption and heart disease. So this is really important that everybody feels comfortable when they have some ghee. They feel comfortable when they have some coconut oil. They feel comfortable when they have some butter, because we don't want you freaking out and cooking your food in this and saying, oh, it's safer for me to eat the canola oil, or it's safer for me to cook at a high heat with olive oil, because those are things that are incorrect. They're very wrong. And we have to realize we live in a world of a lot of information. There's so much information going on out there. There's a lot of claims being made, and much of it is wrong. So, trust this process. Look at the people who have gone through this program and see what's happening. The big thing that we're worried about here is heart disease. And I get that, and it's completely understandable. So I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into some tests that might be more indicative of your risk for heart disease rather than total cholesterol. Because what a lot of these people are looking at is my total cholesterol numbers went up, and therefore my risk for heart disease went up. And that's not the case, right? That's not the case at all. So some better lab values that'll give you a better indication of your risk for heart disease. One of them is your triglyceride to HDL ratio. So HDL is referred to as the good cholesterol. LDL is referred to as the bad. Triglycerides are basically your fat molecules in your blood. It's going to be very indicative of your state of insulin resistance, right? So that triglyceride to HDL ratio is going to be a very good marker for your insulin sensitivity and how insulin resistant you are. So that's one good one to look at. And the other one I would recommend is looking at your A1C. And that's going to be a good indication of your overall level of inflammation. So what we're doing there is we're looking at insulin sensitivity and inflammation. Those are the two main things that are much better at looking at it. But it gets confusing, because even with things like LDL, that's what's referred to as the bad cholesterol. There's two different types of LDLs, and there's like particle B and there's particle A. And particle B is the small, dense particles, and these are the ones that can kind of get trapped in your blood vessels and stuck there. And they're the ones that can be more problematic with things like heart disease. And you have particle B, which is not as dense, bigger and puffy, and these are more favorable in terms of good cholesterol. So it gets very confusing. It gets very confusing. It's a very deep topic. There's a great book by a guy named Jimmy Moore called The Cholesterol Myth. I highly recommend if anybody's wants to know more about cholesterol, to check that out. There's also a great ebook by Chris Kresser that talks a lot about cholesterol. And they're both people that are, advocates of kind of this low carb, paleo, keto world that we're essentially moving people towards. But yeah, it's really important you feel good about that and know that these studies are going to keep coming out. They always will. If you look at them a little closer, you'll find that often there's ties to some sort of food industry or some funding going on that supports these claims. But as far as coconut oil, it is a high quality food, super safe to cook with, has a high smoke point. It has been shown, and these are studies that have been shown it improves blood lipid profile, reduces your unwanted belly fat. It's anti-inflammatory, it's antimicrobial, super high in antioxidants, and it's good for your brain, so it reduces your risk for Alzheimer's and things like that. So essentially I wouldn't worry about it. I've worked with enough people now, and I'm talking thousands and thousands of people, and recommended coconut oil. We just have not seen these problems. Every now and then we do see cholesterol numbers go up. We see them go up, we see them go down. Because it's a different deal, and different people react to the consumption of fats in a different way. But just because it goes up doesn't mean it's necessarily your risk for heart disease has gone up. And we talked about this too, the difference between causation and correlation, right? So if I had a study and I looked at the relationship between ice cream and shark attacks, for instance, right? If I was like, oh, wow, shark attacks go up and so does the consumption of ice cream. Right. So could I then say that the consumption of ice cream is what's causing shark attacks? It's a correlate, because what's really happening is it's the summertime, right, and people are eating ice cream by the beach, and they're going swimming, and they're more likely to go swim in the warm ocean, right? So that's a correlate, right? And that's the same thing that's happening with saturated fat, right? People are looking at, oh, this person had a heart attack. What was their blood cholesterol level? And it's a correlate. The cholesterol is a repair mechanism. It is there it's like the firemen in the fire. The firemen are always there when the fire's there. They're there to put the fire out. In the same way, cholesterol is there to put the fire out from the damage that's been caused by insulin, like insulin sensitivity and inflammation. And those two things come from too much consumption of refined carbohydrates, too much sugar, too much glucose, too much liquid carbohydrates, and these inflammatory seed oils, industrial seed oils that we're trying to get you away from, right? So oftentimes these people who say coconut oil is bad, they'll recommend something that is actually problematic to you. And they're not working with people. They're just looking at old studies done in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're working off a very, very old paradigm. They're not looking at the big picture. So that's all I got to say about that, yeah. You got any thoughts on it?
I love coconut oil, and I've been using it for a long time, and I absolutely enjoy it. When I saw that study that came out, because it just created so much fear in everybody, and it was frustrating to see everyone react right away to say, wow, this is so bad for us, it's poison, like, should I be eating it? And so I'm happy that you touched on this and provided some clarification for people to understand that there are studies that are constantly coming out. Even coffee, like one day you'll hear coffee is really good for your heart, and then fast forward a few months later and you'll hear, don't have coffee, it's going to give you a heart attack. Like, so they're always like going back and forth. So
it is really confusing. It's super confusing. And the thing is, we're real big on, there's not a one size fits all. Like there's no like one diet that's going to work for everybody. And in terms of how many macronutrients you need or I need, or we're all different, or how this food might react to you and how this food might not react to you. Some of you may actually do very poor with coconut oil because every time you eat it, your stool gets runny or something like that. I don't know, but and we're trying to give general recommendations, and we're trying to expose the big things that are making most people sick and unhealthy and And that's sugar, that's inflammatory fats, that's gut irritating foods. Like, bam, cut those out. What you're left with is whole, real food, what humans have been eating forever. And you're going to immediately get a big bump in whatever you're doing. You're going to improve.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that concludes the questions we have. So
that's it?
Yes, because we had one, but I talked with Fred because he asked about peanut oil. And so we went over that with it being a legume and how you're supposed to avoid that as well. That was the last of the question we have, but those are the 6 questions that we had.
Oh, okay. Well, wonderful. Well, great. Well, while we still have some more time here, I did want to talk about carbohydrates,
Yes.
right? Because that's one of the things where I think people also have this belief that carbs are bad. You know, I remember when I first started eating, like in an ancestral way, the paleo way, or whatever you want to call it, people would ask me what I was doing. And I was like, well, I'm eating this, this, and this, and this. And I would even say, like, I have sweet potatoes and I have vegetables and I have fruit. And they go, well, I can't do that. I have to have carbs, you know? And they have this assumption that the only way to get carbs is from bread, you know,
Right.
or pasta, right? That's kind of what we refer to as carbs. But carbs are not only bread. It's comes from things that I mentioned, like tubers and rice and vegetables and fruit, right? So they're all different, right? But what we want you to do, like I mentioned earlier, is focus on carbohydrates that are more nutrient dense and that have much less sugar, specifically if your goals are to lose weight, right? So as I mentioned, it's not a one-size-fits-all diet, right? So someone who is looking to lose weight, who's dealing with a lot of metabolic issues, things like obesity or high triglycerides or high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes or anything like that, how many carbohydrates they eat, it's going to be very different from, say, someone who's very active in the gym and like doing CrossFit, like doing workouts with like, right? So the person that I first mentioned who's looking to lose weight or dealing with health issues, it's very likely that they're inflamed, and it's very likely that they're insulin resistant. So I've talked about this before, but insulin is the hormone secreted by the pancreas, and its job is to once glucose enters the bloodstream, the pancreas starts secreting that insulin to go pick up the glucose molecule, and it goes over to your cells, and it kind of opens the door, and then that insulin and glucose go in the cell for energy to be exchanged, right? But when we have too much glucose in the bloodstream, right, it causes a whole lot of insulin to be produced, and there's too much glucose trying to get into the cells, and then the door is like, you can't be here, right? You got to go somewhere else, and that's essentially the state of insulin resistance, right? And when that happens over and over again, that's when we start to pile on fat, right? Because if the glucose can't get in the cell, it goes and stores itself as fat, and those people have lost insulin sensitivity. It's kind of like the bouncer at the club who's like no longer nice. He's not sensitive anymore. He's to my feelings, right? He's resistant, right? So those people, like, the problem more than likely almost every single time is they're consuming too many carbohydrates, and they're consuming carbohydrates that are that get broken down into glucose very quickly, right? So foods that have little fiber, like liquid carbohydrates, or let's say bread, because bread is a carbohydrate called amylopectin A, which gets broken down extremely rapidly. So that consistent consumption of refined carbohydrates and breads is easy, especially with somebody who's not moving much, who's not demanding glucose as a fuel utilization. Like people are sitting in chairs, all day and not moving much. Those people are very likely to become insulin resistant. So the prescription for those people is always going to be to minimize your consumption of carbohydrates. Obviously, get rid of the big offenders like the liquid carbohydrates, the breads, but you're also going to be better off if you minimize the real fruity fruits like mangoes and bananas and even like things like grapes and apples. Stick to mostly berries, right? If you stick to, especially during the first 2 weeks of the challenge, if you can just stick to mostly berries and not get too crazy on the fruit, you'll gain that insulin sensitivity back much easier. And that's the whole point, is to and I've said this before too. It's like, when you walk into a room of strong perfume, and you first walk in, you're like, whoa, you're super sensitive to it. But you hang out in the room for a while, you can't smell it anymore, right? It's the same thing. We got to get you out of the carbohydrate room so that your body can process the glucose again, right? So that's essentially why our global recommendation here for most people, because we know most people are looking to lose weight, because we survey you, is to eat a lower carbohydrate, like vegetables, right? So vegetables are super high in nutrition, very low in toxicity, very low in carbohydrates, super high in fiber. So you're getting much less glucose in the bloodstream, and the glucose that you are getting is dispensed in a very slow way, right? So that allows the pancreas to kind of get some breath here, and the cells of your body to get some breath. Everybody just breathe a little bit, and we restore that insulin sensitivity, right? And once you've gotten down to like your happy weight, or you're close to it and you're moving around again, you can start ratcheting up your carbohydrates. But the idea is to find your carbohydrate sweet spot, okay? Now, if someone's already super lean and they're very active, and I'm talking like CrossFitting, when I was competing, I would eat anywhere from like 200 to 300, sometimes 400 grams of carbohydrates a day, like sweet potatoes, white rice, white potatoes, like all the time, because I had to have that glycogen in my liver to use for performance. I had to have that level of glucose in my body, but because I would not be able to do it without that.
Yeah.
But that's not most people that we're dealing with in this group, right? So it's a very individualized thing. Different macronutrients for different people. Essentially, the idea is if you're looking to lose weight, if you're dealing with metabolic issues, keep it on the low carb side. Stick with mostly berries when it comes to fruit. If you're super active, if you're competing, if you're already lean, it's completely fine to throw in some sweet potatoes. Even white potatoes are fine. If you don't react to it after the challenge, white rice would be a good option. But that's for people who are super active and already lean, right? So it's different from person to person.
Perfect. Yeah, because they say it's a lot, it's like when you have your good and bad carbs, it's your bad carbs, it's way easier to overeat. Like sit down with, a bunch of pasta or bread, and then you don't feel full. And then if you sit down with like a salad or like some berries, you'll feel full, and then you'll last longer too. So there's a huge difference too in what a good carb is and a bad carb.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up too, because the big thing there is a hormone called leptin. Yeah. So leptin is a satiety hormone, right? That tells your brain, when you eat, there's a signal that's sent to your brain that says, this is how much nutrition this food has, and I'm going to tell you whether or not you need to keep eating more, right? Yeah. So foods like pasta or, sugary foods, refined processed foods, super palatable. Like they're very, very tasty. I mean, they have scientists in the lab, literally, their one job is to just make people eat more. It even says it on like Pringles, right? I bet you can't eat just one. And you can't, because they're working really, really hard to make sure you can't eat just one, right? So you keep eating, but the food has very little nutrition. So your mind is like, well, we haven't found what we're looking for, so keep eating. So keep eating. So keep eating. And it's very hyper palatable, and that's what causes us to eat more calories with very little nutrition. So just eat more nutrition, and that signal gets sent. More quality foods is what I'm saying, but eat higher quality foods, and that signal gets sent to the brain that ding, 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 I've had enough. I don't need to keep eating. Yeah.
Perfect. We actually just had another question pop up.
Oh, yes.
I can't see names. I do apologize for that. This one does say, is it okay to eat avocados daily?
Yeah. Avocados, olives, macadamia nuts. Those are great fats to eat. I eat avocados daily. The one thing, and this goes for anything, I mean, you just be careful with it, because any food that you do overeat, it has the potential that eventually you could react to it. That's just the case with any food, but I'd say just watch it, just watch it. And you're looking after things like your digestion, your skin. But avocados are great. And they also have really low carbohydrates and high amounts of fat. So it's really good for people who are looking to improve their blood lipid profile, improve insulin sensitivity. I highly recommend them.
Yes,
yeah.
And they're delicious.
They are so good. What I like to do is I cut them up in cubes, and I put some salt on there and some lemon juice, and I'm like, just mash it. I swear, it's amazing.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, I like to do mixed veggies like carrots, cauliflower, broccoli, and then at the bottom of it, I'll put avocado. Yeah. And then just kind of mix it all up, and it's like so good. Yeah. I never get tired of that.
You can't. It tastes so good. We actually got another question in.
All right.
Are there symptoms or signs when you are on insulin resistant?
Yeah, it would. So a good sign would be some of those biomarkers that I talked about, like obesity is a clear sign that you're insulin resistant. Your triglycerides, if they're above normal levels, that's going to be a good sign. High blood pressure is going to be another sign that you're insulin resistant. And most type 2 diabetics, I mean, essentially that's how you become type 2 diabetic, but type 2 diabetics are insulin resistant as well. So those are the big four. And if you fix the insulin problem, you'll fix all those issues, right? And that comes from the consumption of less refined carbohydrates, more nutritious vegetables with less sugar, and consuming more quality fats, because fats slow the release of glucose in the bloodstream, and good quality proteins. So those are easy things to do, but it takes time. It takes time. Just like it takes time to get out of the room of perfume where you can like have that sensitivity again, it just takes time.
Yeah.
And don't forget about other like sleep, stress, and good quality, consistent sun exposure all positively impact your insulin sensitivity in a big way. So make sure you're doing those things. You could be eating really well, but if you're going to bed at 12 and waking up at 5, or going to bed at 2 with like fluorescent lights, LEDs on, those things will jack up your circadian rhythm and therefore mess up your insulin sensitivity. So really be careful to sleep well, get some sun, just don't get burned, but be consistent about getting sun. It's really important. Move, do some resistance exercise, walk every day, take time to breathe. Those things all positively impact your insulin sensitivity.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That is all of our questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And if there's any more questions, feel free to comment. We always like to address any questions we can, and we'll provide any resources that you ask for here. And you guys are doing awesome. Thank you so much for watching and just being a part of this community. You're all doing amazing.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
All right. Adios.
All right. Take care. Bye, guys.